We want to welcome our members and our two witnesses, and I have called this hearing to update the subcommittee on the Department of Defense efforts to improve the cybersecurity of the defense industrial base. Defense industrial base cybersecurity is a broad and complex undertaking with many significant facets that need to be examined today. For instance, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or the CMMC, for short, is intended to establish a minimum guideline for DoD's industrial base partners as to what standards must be met to conduct business with the DoD. Or Section 1648 of the fiscal year 2020 NDAA directed DoD to establish a framework for the cybersecurity of the defense industrial base, which included numerous elements and options for the department beyond just the CMMC initiative. In addition to Section 1648, this subcommittee has enacted a dozen or more legislative provisions relating to the industrial base cybersecurity in the last several years, including recommendations from the Cyberspace Solarium Commission. Of particular interest to me is how DoD is going to hold prime contractors accountable for the cybersecurity performance of their subcontractors and the conduct of the programs for the DoD. I've been making this point for a couple of years now, and I hope the department has taken this to heart. But in order to build out our cybersecurity protections with the defense industrial base, we must set a baseline of standards with the CMMC initiative. Previously, DoD required that companies executing defense contracts implement a series of control and cyber hygiene practices developed by the National Institute for Standards and Technology. Companies were required to certify that they met the standards or to present a plan of action that would bring them into compliance. Because this program involved self-certification, compliance was suspect, and that lack of verified compliance led DoD to propose a CMMC model. To perform contract work for DoD, a company would have to meet one of the 5 specified security maturity levels and receive a certification to that effect. DoD has issued a so-called interim rule under the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation process and is beginning a series of pilot programs to test and implement CMMC. CMMC is intended to be financially self-sustaining, with companies paying for their assessments and certifications, and those companies then recouping compliance costs as part of their cost estimates to the DoD. Industrial-based companies, especially smaller contractors, are very concerned about the cost involved in regular on-site assessments, the complexity of complying with cybersecurity practices that they have difficult understanding, and the degree of consistency and fairness in assessing compliance across the expected large number of assessing organizations and many tens of thousands of other companies. In response to those concerns, Deputy Secretary Hicks in March directed an independent review of CMMC. That review was intended to last about a month. We postponed a scheduled subcommittee hearing in April in the hope that we would know the results of this review on this date, May 18th. Unfortunately, we will not receive the details of the review today. While the review itself is complete, the review team's recommendations are still being finalized, and the review is officially connected to internal deliberations and modifications to the interim rule on CMMC. We do understand, however, that Secretary Hicks will be making significant modifications to the program. I hope that what we will hear today will be welcome to Congress and the defense industrial base, particularly our small businesses. In addition to your updates on the CMMC review, I hope to hear concrete plans for how each of you plan to ensure our entire defense industrial base receives the support and guidance they need to keep our warfighters well supplied and safe. The relationship between DoD and its private industry contractors should be the gold standard for cybersecurity across the federal government and provide an example to other federal agencies who secure private critical infrastructure. I know this hearing is focused on defense industrial base today, but improving cyber defense is only one side of the coin in our cyber posture. From the quarterly updates the subcommittee receives on cyber operations, it appears to me that DoD is doing an excellent job at taking the fight to our adversaries. But what concerns me is our inability to know exactly what groups are posing a threat to industry so that we can adequately monitor, intercept, and if required, target them. I make this point because I'm worried about the lack of a formalized and concerted whole-of-government response to both foreign and domestic cyber threats and the lack of authority in a central figure to give these threats the attention they deserve. The Colonial Pipeline hack is only a recent public example of the threats we face on a daily basis. In order to increase our federal coordination, and I know this is not a perfect comparison, I look at the examples set by a position such as the Director of National Intelligence, which has crucial awareness and the opportunity to coordinate the intelligence efforts of 17 independent agencies. We've yet to see how successful the National Cyber Director will be in their role, but it seems to me that each department in the federal government must reinvent the wheel every time a cyber event happens, which costs us time that we could be using to respond, let alone the ability to be aware of the threat before its impacts are critical to our infrastructure. I'm well aware that this falls a bit out of the jurisdiction of this subcommittee. But it's imperative that we're coordinating as seamlessly as possible with private industry, and I believe DoD is on the way to developing a scalable model for that coordination. I look forward to working with my colleagues to identify a pathway forward to provide better congressional oversight on a whole-of-government approach on our cyber vulnerabilities. With that, I'm going to ask my friend Senator Rounds for his opening statement.